Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to another episode of Quran in English. My name is Ahmed, and I'm happy to take you through the final section of Surah Taha, which means the chapter of Taha, which is chapter 20 of the Quran. I'm happy. I like these verses. They're very pretty. They're very cool. I'm very excited. Before we get into the verses, I must always explain that I'm not a Quranic scholar, nor am I an Arabic linguist. I'm not studied in the Arabic language beyond school, nor have I studied the Quran. In fact, for a lot of the Quran, this is my first read through of it. Not these specific verses, but when I'm reading it this time, I'm reading it to try and see how best I can understand it as much as possible. Because I love the Quran. I believe that it is the literal word of God, and I am trying to gain guidance from it. And I'm sharing my education journey with you in the hopes that maybe it might help somebody. So if you have something that you see that you disagree with or have a different perspective on, feel free to drop a comment on. I love learning from you, and I hope that you learn from me, but the whole purpose is education. So let's see what we do and we get up to. But without further ado, we begin with أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم, and off we go.
وعنت الوجوه للحي القيوم وقد خاب من حمل ظلما.
Yeah, so the previous verse that we were looking at before this, we were looking at God and that He knows what is in front of their hands and behind them, which we believe to be their future and their past. And now here we see it starts with saying, and the faces will be humbled for the ever living and the self-sustaining. I like better than self-subsisting. I'm not familiar with that. Al-Hayy al-Qayyum is a common. These are two names for God. As I mentioned before, that God has 99 names, and these are the two. I think they're both in Surah Al-Ahad al-Tawheed. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. No, maybe it's in الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم. Yeah, it's in Ayat al-Kursi. Ayat al-Kursi, which is verse 255 of chapter 2, Surah al-Baqarah. So I say this quite a lot. للحي القيوم, the ever-living and self-sustaining. They're kind of two words to talk about God. And here it's saying, what is it saying? Is that faces will be humbled before the ever-living and ever-self-sustaining. Kind of like, it's also all talking about Judgment Day, right? This is towards the end. This is essentially what's happening on that day. No intercession in the previous verses will happen. Granted permission by the most compassionate, and He knows what's ahead of them and behind them. And then here it says, all faces will be humbled before the ever-living. And it ends with, and Khaba is not exactly failed, disgraced. Sounds more accurate. From carrying the wrongdoing, they will be disgraced, they'll be burdened, they will have failed. Khab is, I think, disgraced sounds like the more accurate term to describe it. So this is, all faces will be humble before God, and those who did bad will feel like shite. Shite. I don't know why I'm not saying those insults as if. Anyway, let's just focus on it. Faces will be humbled, and the people who did bad will feel terrible. And on the flip side,
ومن يعمل من الصالحات وهو مؤمن فلا يخاف ظلما ولا هضما.
And whoever does from righteous deeds while he is a believer, then he will not fear any injustice and not any deprivation. They will not be wrong and then they're denied. Those who do good and believe will not fear injustice and will not be denied their reward. And nor will they feel deprivation, but denied their reward. Nor will they be denied like what they've earned. It makes a lot of sense. So you have the flip sides. Those who do bad will feel terrible. Those who do good will not have their good deeds wasted. But it's important that it clarifies by saying, while they are a believer, believing is still the key. Belief is the biggest key. Which kind of like reminds me of like Peter Pan somehow. The concept is like that fairy dust alone is not enough to fly. You have to believe that you can. And there's a lot of magic in the power of belief. And this is why belief in what you believe in is such a critical thing from the Quran's perspective. And that believing that there's only one God and not believing in the other gods. And not in the sense that you believe that they exist, but putting your belief in them. The act of committing belief to something is the key that the Quran harkens on about time and time again. I think it's very, very important, along with doing good deeds. Just believing and not being a good person doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get far. If you believe and do terrible things, then I don't know what to expect from you. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. And then we get into the Quran and what was being revealed.
وكذلك أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا وصرفنا فيه من الوعيد لعلهم يتقون أو يحدث لهم ذكرا.
And thus we have sent down the Quran in Arabic, and we have explained in it from, it says the warnings, I do believe warnings is correct, but the technical word is promises, from that which is, and like, I don't think it's just the warning of negative. It's also the warning and the promise of glory and the promise of heaven. It's like, it's both. It's the warning of hell and the promise of heaven. Al-Wa'id is, I think, promises, but I might just be my limited Arabic understanding, and it is warning specifically. But it says, we explain in it all the warnings, the promises, so that they may be mindful or fearful, or that it may cause for them remembrance. Dhikr is causes them to be mindful, causes them to be remembrance, causes them to utter the names of God, to kind of always have God's mention on their tongue. And we're going to see an example of this, of what the Quran tells the Prophet Muhammad in a second. And constantly thinking about God, constantly mentioning God, constantly speaking about God is also an intended consequence of the Quran. And I have found this. I found that the more that I read the Quran, the more that I find myself in constant alignment with God, in constant with keeping God on top of my head. And it's hard to keep all the concepts that the Quran talks about in your own head, because there's so many concepts that it's talking about, and you can't remember all of what is said. You can memorize everything, but knowing what it all said is a different concept altogether. And so it is important to read the Quran in order to kind of have that remembrance, that mentioning, that constant having God on your tongue, so to speak, which I find very interesting. And it emphasizes that the Quran was in the Arabic language, because now we're going to talk about the Prophet Muhammad specifically and what had happened.
فتعالى الله الملك الحق ولا تعجل بالقرآن من قبل أن يقضى إليك وحيه وقل رب زدني علما.
It's a very beautiful expression. Now, a few things are being said in this verse. First, it says, فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. Exalted is God, the King that is true, the true King. Which, there is a lot in this one verse. Exalted is God, the true King. Because the first thing that comes to mind is the concept of Jesus, and the Christian belief that Jesus is the true King, right? And trying to figure out what Jesus' role is and who Jesus is, and when he comes back, what exactly will he do? What does being the Messiah mean? Is it a form of ruling? Is it a form of king? Is it a form of guidance? When he comes back, what will happen? We have a lot of questions that we don't know. But the Quran here is explicitly stating that God is the true King, and that the title of true King belongs to God and God alone. That's what it's essentially saying. فَتَعَالَى اللَّهُ الْمَلِكُ الْحَقِّ. The true King. It's a title. Al-Malik al-Haq, the King of Truth. The true King is more accurate. And it seems to be very, very, very explicit in stating that. So in my trying to understand what is Jesus and what is his role, a part of me thought that if he comes back, he will come back in the capacity of some form of ruler, some sort of king, because that has been alluded to a lot by what I could hear from my Christian counterparts and my Jewish counterparts. Not my Jewish counterparts, because they don't believe in Jesus being the Messiah, but the Christian counterparts. Let's just focus on them. And there seems to be a feeling that he will rule and he will be king. And that was the concept, that he'll be heaven on earth. But I have to kind of wait until I explore the Bible itself to understand if that statement of kinghood has come from Jesus. Like, did Jesus make any specific kingly claims? I would question. Or was it the apostles, the canonical gospel writers? Are they the ones that claimed that he was going to be the true king? Actually, we have the power of claim to be the true king. Yes, Jesus claims to be king. We clarify the kingdom was not of this world. Fulfilling prophecy. Title King of the Jews was labeled to him, Son of Man. You say that I am king, for this I was born, and for this I have come into the world to bear witness to the truth. Well, that doesn't actually say that he is the king. I don't think we're going to find that answer now currently, so I'd be very curious to see what that says. But if we continue the verse, it says, and do not hasten with the Quran from before it is completed to you in its revelation. Now this, we understand, is being directly said to the Prophet Muhammad. I said sometimes when it talks to the Prophet Muhammad or is directing to you, it can be, more than just the Prophet Muhammad. This one specifically to the Prophet Muhammad, because the Quran was revealed to him. And this statement, وَلَا تَجْعَلْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مِنْ قَبْلِ أَنْ يُقْضَى إِلَيْكَ وَحْيَهُ, and do not hasten with the Quran before it has been completed to you its revelation, means several things in one. It indicates that there was a sort of desire or a hastening from the Prophet Muhammad for the Quran to come faster, which is natural. Obviously you want it all to come immediately, and I am an impatient person myself. I want all the information as quickly as possible, and I want it now. So I understand that it's very relatable, but also the Quran saying that, be patient. These things are being revealed at the time that they're being revealed, for a specific moment, for a specific reason, for a specific rhyme. Trust in God's plan, essentially, is what's being said, and have some patience. And even if this message is being told to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and as exalted and as fantastic and as amazing that he was still being told to have a bit more patience in his process. And then it says, and say, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. And this is also a very, very beautiful and humble claim. The Quran is telling the Prophet Muhammad, saying, my Lord, increase me in knowledge. But this is something we can say, Rabbi zidni ilman. My Lord, increase me in knowledge. And this is something that we can all, pray for and ask for. And the Quran has a lot of these verses, these prayers that the prophets and the messengers recite, and these callings to God that they kind of ask for something, and then we can kind of pull from those verses and learn for them ourselves. And this is a very beautiful one. Rabbi zidni ilman. God, increase me in knowledge. It's a statement of being humble. It's a statement of asking God for guidance, asking God for knowledge, and for praying for it and waiting for it to come at the right time. Subhanallah.
ولقد عهدنا إلى آدم من قبل فنسي ولم نجد له عزما.
And now we get into an interesting narrative that we might have covered a couple times throughout the Quran, but we get a little bit more detail in the story here, which I think is very interesting. I used to in the beginning when I was reading the Quran, I was thinking, why are stories spread out throughout the Quran? And why isn't all the stories just in one section in one go? And I found it to be very cool that now that as I'm reading the Quran at the rate that I'm reading it, we kind of revisit these characters. It's like, oh, a little bit of this story, a little bit of that story, a little bit of that story. It's kind of like you're watching a TV show, and then suddenly you're getting certain flashes of this moment. And then a few chapters down the line, you get another flash of another moment. They're giving you more color and more detail as you go along, and you're forming the idea of these characters, of these narratives, of these stories in more color. And in this specific verse, we're going back to, and verily we had made a covenant with Adam from before, but he forgot, and وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا, and we did not find determination in him. I didn't actually think of what that meant. It kind of feels like once he failed, he lost determination. Is that what it's saying? That's very interesting. I didn't actually think about that. وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. We made a covenant with Adam, but he forgot, and so we did not find determination in him, which is very interesting. And then we get into a wonderful verse that we've discussed many, many times in the Quran, and it goes like,
وَإِذْ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا إِبْلِيسَ أَبَى.
When we said to the angels, prostrate to Adam, they prostrated except for Iblis, who refused. Again, the command is given to the angels. The exception is Iblis. Was Iblis an angel? We definitely know he was jinn. Was he also an angel? Is question mark, because the Quran is full of these verses, these standalone verses. The angels were told to bow down, and they bowed down except for Iblis, which is like the only way the except works is if he's a part of the crowd. The way that Muslim scholars have obviously explained it is that he was among them. But it didn't say we told to the angels and those among them. It says we told to the angels bow down. And they all bowed down except for Iblis. It doesn't say anybody other than the angels. It didn't say the angels and the jinn. It didn't say the angels and the inhabitants of heavens. It said we told the angels to bow down, and Iblis refused. He was the only exception. There's a footnote here. See footnote for 234. No, we're not going back to... We know who Iblis is. Iblis is a very common character in the Quran.
فَقُلْنَا يَا آدَمُ إِنَّ هَذَا عَدُوٌّ لَكَ وَلِزَوْجِكَ فَلَا يُخْرِجَنَّكُمَا مِنَ الْجَنَّةِ فَتَشْقَى.
We said, O Adam, indeed this is an enemy for you. Again, Iblis, once he became the devil, we said to Adam that this is an enemy for you and for your wife. So Iblis, the devil, is going to be an enemy for you and your wife. And this was before they fell down to heaven. So this was while Adam and Eve were in heaven. Before they fell, God told him, Iblis is your enemy. So he said, do not let him drive you both from paradise so that you would suffer. So God gave Adam the warning, don't let him trick you, and don't eat from that tree. And otherwise you get kicked out of heaven and you will suffer. And why would he suffer? Because if he was to stay in heaven, what would happen to him? Adam and Eve, if they were to stay in heaven, then they would...
إِنَّ لَكَ أَلَّا تَجُوعَ فِيهَا وَلَا تَعْرَى.
Indeed, for you, that you will not be hungry in it, and you will not be unclothed. Not the right word. It's not the right word of unclothed, because they are naked in heaven, right? So they are unclothed, but the cloth here isn't the concept of clothing. And another verse of the Quran talks about what they were wearing was their taqwa, their dignity, their righteousness. And therefore they did not need clothing because they were dignified and they were righteous. And we'll see the example of them being naked shortly in the next couple of verses of what happens, how they were naked, then what happened after they ate the fruit. But essentially God is saying, don't let the devil trick you out of here, because here you ain't going to be hungry and you ain't going to be, let's just say, ashamed.
وَأَنَّكَ لَا تَظْمَأُ فِيهَا وَلَا تَضْحَى.
And that you will not suffer from thirst in it, nor will you be scorched by the sun or suffer the sun's heat. It doesn't mention the sun, but like you won't be scorched, you won't be heated. And again, there's the footnote of there's no sun or cold weather in paradise. There is no cold weather. I don't think it mentions that there's no sun. It mentions that you won't be burnt. It doesn't mention that there won't be a sun. But I don't know how but generally the understanding is that the light in heaven is perfect. You're not going to be burnt and you're not going to be cold. You're not going to be too hot. You're not going to be too cold. It's going to be Goldilocks just right, you know? But did Adam and Eve stay in heaven? Well, we all know how that story ends.
فوسوس إليه الشيطان قال يا آدم هل أدلك على شجرة الخلد وملك لا يبلى.
So waswas is an interesting expression. Whispered is not giving it enough clarity. The act of waswas is like, it's kind of like that. It's kind of whispering, but it's more than whispering. It's kind of like snickering. It's kind of like saying something so that nobody can hear you, so that you can say something naughty, you know, like it's this waswas is like to kind of speak to the heart and tempt it and cause temptation to cause forward. So the devil, al-shaytan, who Iblis became the shaytan after he disobeyed, didn't want to bow down to Adam, he whispered towards him. He whispered towards Adam, which is very interesting. Here it's very specific. It's saying that the devil is whispering to Adam, because in the Christian and Jewish narratives, it was Eve that was the one that told Adam that we should bite from the fruit. So the devil whispered to Adam. He said, "O Adam, shall I direct you to a tree of eternity and a kingdom that does not deteriorate, does not fade away?" So he told him, tree of immortality and a kingdom that does not fade away. It's a temptation in heaven. Why does the devil do it? There's a lot of stories that we can get into. But he says to Adam, shall I show you a tree of immortality and a kingdom that does not fade?
فأكلا منها فبدت لهما سوآتهما وطفقا يخصفان عليهما من ورق الجنة وعصى آدم ربه فغوى.
And then it says, and again, I told you that it was the devil whispered to Adam. However, here it says, they both ate from it. So it became apparent to them their shame, and by their shame, them being naked, being ashamed. Because it says the next thing, and they began to fasten upon themselves from the leaves of paradise. And this is a visual that we can kind of see. They were naked, and then they realized they were naked, and they realized there was shame in it. Which again, it harkens back to that, what I was telling you, that they were wearing their taqwa. They weren't wearing clothes, they were wearing their dignity. And they lost their dignity. And once they lost their dignity, they decided, we have to cover up our private bits. And they grabbed leaves, and then you have the visual of Adam and Eve with the leaves covering their private bits. But here it says they both ate. The Quran does not say Adam ate or Eve ate. It doesn't put the blame on either of them. They both did it. But then it says, and Adam disobeyed his Lord and erred. I want to kind of see... when God is giving him the covenant before, he says, "O Adam, indeed this is an enemy for you and your wife." So the instruction is given to Adam. The instruction isn't given to Eve, which is very interesting. And that's why in this verse, when it talks about it, it says Adam disobeyed his Lord and erred. Even though they both ate, it was Adam that disobeyed, not Adam and Eve, which is very interesting. So it feels like the covenant was made with Adam, not with Eve. Which I had the question come up recently of why are there only male prophets, not female prophets. There seems to be a distinction between the two. And also, if you look at men and women today, men tend to cause a lot more damage, devastation, violations, sexual predator, criminal records, far more than women. I might be biased, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, like, also if you look at all the male leaders and all the wars and all that jazz. But just the fact that a man can walk at night anywhere and be safe, and a woman has to be careful where she's walking, just gives you an indication of who's transgressing the most, right? You know? So I do feel like there's more given to men with the concept of men are responsible for more, you know? And at least this verse says, and Adam disobeyed his Lord, and he erred, and he lost his way. Here they're adding the footnote of, unlike in Bible in Genesis 3, the Quran does not blame Eve for Adam's fall from the garden. Yeah, it's a very key distinction. It does not blame Eve. If anything, it seems to say that Adam's the one that broke the covenant that God made with Adam. God didn't make the covenant, or at least from these verses, God spoke to Adam when he made the covenant. And he told him, don't fall for the devil and don't bite from the tree. But there might be other, again, these verses are at the very end of at the very first, it's spread throughout the Quran. And maybe at the end of the readings of the Quran, I'll take different topics to kind of explain them specifically point by point, which I think is very interesting. And it did say he lost his determination. So let's see what happens next.
ثم اجتباه ربه فتاب عليه وهدى.
He says, then his God, chose him. So he turned towards, so he forgave him and he guided him. And here it's the God is doing the actions in all of these. God chose him. Fatab alayhi. It says he accepted his repentance, but that's not the correct term. Tab alayhi means that he forgave him in a way. Like the actions with God, not with Adam, not something that Adam did. It's saying that God did this, and he guided him. Now, that's being said, that's not to say that Adam did not request or did not be humble or did not ask for his God's forgiveness. I'm just saying that in this specific verse, it talks about God chose him, God forgave him, and God guided him. You know? And then comes the fall from heaven.
قال اهبطا منها جميعا بعضكم لبعض عدو فإما يأتينكم مني هدى فمن اتبع هداي فلا يضل ولا يشقى.
He said, go down from it altogether. And this is a very interesting expression. He didn't say go down from heaven, the both of you, as in Adam and Eve. He said, قَالَ اهْبِطَا مِنْهَا جَمِيعًا. Go down, all of you. So who is the all that God is referring to? Now there's another verse in the Quran about the jinn, that they used to be a part of heaven. They used to be able to hear things, and then at some point they were kind of sealed off. So it's also an understanding that the jinn had kind of gone from heaven. Definitely Adam and Eve. Definitely al-shaytan. The devil no longer has access to heaven. Why am I saying it definitely? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure. But there is a group. Yeah, here they've added the word with Satan, but I think it's more than just with Satan. I feel like it was an expulsion of a mass. It feels like a group. And it says, some of you are to others an enemy. This was before Adam and Eve had made any children, so they still hadn't done Cain and Abel, the first two that will be enemies towards each other. So I do feel like at the very least it's talking about the devil. At most it's talking about jinn, it's talking about entities, it's talking about, I think, quite a few things that fell down from heaven all at once at the same time. And then it says, yeah, some of you will be enemies to others, and whoever... Then when guidance comes to you from me, guidance, then whoever follows my guidance, then he will not be led astray, nor will he suffer. Now here they've added the word suffer in the next life, because, I mean, some people who are guided are suffering on the earth, but there's also the philosophical explanation is that if you truly believe and if you truly follow God's guidance, then whatever happens, you have a sort of grace with it, because you understand that it is temporary and you will get your eternal. Like, people who have absolute faith have peace even in times of tragedy, right? which is, of course, it's a huge thing to have that amount of faith. It's not exactly like everyone can do it. But here it's saying that whoever follows my guidance will not be led astray. Yeah, very clear.
ومن أعرض عن ذكري فإن له معيشة ضنكا ونحشره يوم القيامة أعمى.
And whoever turns away from my remembrance, from mentioning God. And here they add a footnote of saying the reminder is another name for the Quran, saying whoever turns from the Quran. I feel like they're not understanding the word dhikr. Dhikr is more than the Quran. It also includes the Quran. The Quran is also dhikr, but the dhikr is not just the Quran, is what I'm trying to say. Dhikr is a superset, and the Quran is one of the things within dhikr. But I think dhikr can also be the remembrance of God, the mention of God, keeping God in your mind, kind of like keeping God on your tongue, if you remember how we were describing it before. And whoever, turns away from dhikri, from my remembrance, from God's remembrance, then indeed for him is a life, and it was an interesting word, dankan, which here they said it's a life that's straightened. Here it said that it's a miserable life. For me, it felt like it was a narrow life. Like it's describing that, you will have good things, but they will be like temporary. Like that's kind of the idea that I got. But also, it made me think about those who live without faith. And you kind of see this specifically when it comes to the people who have all their needs met, and they're just living life without purpose, without drive. They're just kind of living for the sake of living. They have this kind of, it feels like living life in black and white, whereas people who believe live in technicolor. And it feels like, yeah, you're both alive, but one life just has a glow to it, and one life is just visuals and sensations. And it's just so, I don't know. That's kind of the impression, the feeling that I got, which can translate to a miserable life. But I don't understand straightened how that can work. Let's give it a go in translate. Let's see if that word. In distress. In misery, yeah, it's miserable is close. In distress is another version. Either way, it's going to be a meager. It's not like you will have riches, but you just won't have. Your soul won't be fulfilled. Is how I felt it. And they will be gathered. Gather your children. We'll be gathered on the day of resurrection, and they will be gathered as blind. Now, this is an interesting expression. I don't think it means literal blindness. I think it means metaphorical blindness. However, the next verse kind of talks about the blindness.
قال رب لم حشرتني أعمى وقد كنت بصيرا.
So the person who will be gathered blind will say, my Lord, my God, why did you raise me? Why did you gather me blind? While I used to have sight. So it kind of feels like he's talking about literal vision, right? I used to be able to see, so why did you gather me blind? But the next verse.
قال كذلك أتتك آياتنا فنسيتها وكذلك اليوم تنسى.
So the verse is said in response, God will say, thus you came to you our signs, our verses, but you forgot them. And thus, on today, you will be forgotten. What does forgetting verses and being forgotten have to do with vision? Which then makes you think, okay, I think it's actually a metaphor. It's not literal. It's like you can't see what's happening. You're confused. It's an indication for like a metaphorical blindness. Like I can't see, I can't understand, my brain can't comprehend. I feel like it's more metaphorical rather than a literal blindness, because you also will read on that day your whole life story. So you kind of need to see for that to happen. And they do see hell. So I don't think it's a literal blindness. I think it's a metaphorical blindness based off of the verses.
وكذلك نجزي من أسرف ولم يؤمن بآيات ربه ولعذاب الآخرة أشد وأبقى.
And thus we recompense whoever transgresses and whoever does not believe in the signs of his God. And the punishment of the hereafter is more severe and more lasting. Very clear. This is how we reward those who transgress and don't believe in the revelations.
أفلم يهد لهم كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون يمشون في مساكنهم إن في ذلك لآيات لأولي النهى.
And is it not أفلم يهدي لهم? Okay. Was it not for them like a guidance how many we have destroyed from before them of generations? How many generations we destroyed from them? Was that not a guidance to them? Was that not clear to them? Where they walk in their dwellings and how they were destroyed in their own homes. And the Quran says this multiple times. Like, can they not see the previous centuries and the previous generations that were destroyed in their homes? Which I always go like, how are they supposed to see this? I can imagine the pyramids and the pharaohs, dying of being drowned, being an interesting comment. But not everybody sees this. Not everybody has access to this information. So it's always like, how is this? But maybe it was more apparent 1,500 years ago versus now. I don't know. It's just always one that I kind of struggled with. How is that guidance? But it continues saying, indeed, that in that is a sign for the possessors of intelligence. So maybe I'm not intelligent enough to see this sign. Which, I know the limitations of my knowledge, and I kind of understand it. But yeah, it's very an interesting phrase that is being said.
ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك لكان لزاما وأجل مسمى.
And if it had not been for a word that had proceeded from your Lord, then surely it would have been an obligation and a term that is determined. And I can't for the life of me understand this grammar. Because I feel like if it wasn't for a word from your God, then it would have been an obligation and a term that was determined. Okay, wait, no, I did understand it by the end of it. The idea being is that sometimes people look around and say there is no death and devastation. There, like, even though you tortured and you say in the past that you have brought down trials from the sky, you've split the earth, there was a shriek that froze people. Why is this not happening to people now that are transgressing? And this verse is saying it is because of a decree from God, that this is not happening right now. That's how I understood it. It's not how this is being said in the English translation. Had it not been for a prior decree from your Lord and a term already set, their instant doom would have been inevitable. Yeah, so here they're kind of saying their instant doom would have been inevitable, but it's not instant. It's not happening now because God decreed it for a much later stage. That doesn't mean it's not coming. It just means that that's why it hasn't happened for some time. God uses the terms. This is why it confused me. God uses the terms وَأَجَلٌ مُسَمَّى. He talks about it for every generation, for every civilization, for every empire, for every time that he's about to enact justice or something. There is a decreed term, a determined time. And it feels like that time hasn't come specifically for a lot of these situations.
فاصبر على ما يقولون وسبح بحمد ربك قبل طلوع الشمس وقبل غروبها ومن آناء الليل فسبح وأطراف النهار لعلك ترضى.
Couple things. So first it says, so be patient about what they say. And again, we can understand this to be talked to the Prophet, but it can also apply to all of us. But here the Quran is being very explicit. Be patient. Be patient about what they say. and glorify. And again, I say this can apply to the Prophet, but it can also apply to all of us. If God is telling us, be patient about what people say. And then it continues by saying, and glorify with the praise of God, glorify with thanks to God, before rising sun and before the sunset, and from the hours of the night, and glorify the ends of the day, so that you may be satisfied. Is this going to say the 5 prayers? This verse refers to the times of the 5 prayers. Actually, hang on a second. قبل طلوع الشمس, before sunrise. قبل غروبها, before sunset. When آناء الليل, and from the hours of night. فسبح وأطراف النهار لعلك ترضى. Actually, this talks about the 5 daily prayers. This is the first time that why does nobody refer to this? Oh, this is very exciting, because I Googled multiple times. I was trying to get this verse. This is a good verse that I need to save. Finally, I found the verse that talks about which is the final Quran, and we add a little title. It doesn't say 5 prayers. It says 5 done. It doesn't say the 5 prayers technically. It says وَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ. So glorify with the thanks to God. But that's exactly what you do when you pray. You're essentially glorifying God and you're giving thanks to God, and that's the whole purpose of this. This is very beautiful. I finally found the verse that talks about, and I Googled it and I couldn't find it. Well, this is I mean, as much as I have been critical of certain people that have explained the Quran, I really should be critical of Google searches. And that's kind of why we're reading the Quran in the way that we're doing it. We're reading every verse to kind of figure out what exactly does the Quran say and what exactly does the Quran not say. And I had researched it, and I went into some forums and I went to some discussions, and I had talked to a lot of people, and I'm like, what's the verse? And most people didn't give me this verse as a reason to say that there's 5. But this is talking about exactly glorify God before the rising sun. That's al-Fajr. And before it's setting, that's al-Maghrib. And from the hours of the night, that's al-Layl. And glorify at the ends of the day. There are 2 in the day that isn't before sunrise and isn't after sunset. So that's Dhuhr and Asr. That's 5. It's not saying prayers, but it's saying Sabbih bihamdi rabbika. So if you add the prayers in those moments, then you are fulfilling this command. Very cool. Very, very, very cool. I used to always say that the Quran always talks about 3 prayers, but we learned the 5 prayers from the Prophet Muhammad. But the Quran talks about the 5 times that you should be giving praise to God. And that is very, very, very powerful, very beautiful. Okay, I feel great about that. I love nothing more than to be proven wrong by the Quran, because I love the Quran. And I think the Quran is absolutely the word of God. So it's very, very cool to have read this. I'm very excited, and I learned something new today. Very cool. So it's being said to the Prophet, but again, it could be said to all of us. Don't listen to what they say, and praise God in these moments. And there's something that I, for instance, struggle with. Sometimes I don't always pray at the right time of things. I pray my prayers a little bit delayed, and I sometimes pray them in groups. And I think that I need to start sticking to the timings of the prayer, not just pray 5 times a day anytime that I want, but try as much as possible to stick to the timings. I think that'll be very interesting. Cool. Very, very cool verse. Very, very cool verse. Nice.
ولا تمدن عينيك إلى ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم زهرة الحياة الدنيا لنفتنهم فيه ورزق ربك خير وأبقى.
And again, we've seen this before. And do not extend your eyes to what we have given enjoyment with it ما متعنا به أزواجا منهم. What we have given enjoyment for them in pairs for them. Don't look at what God has given other people. Don't look at their partners. Don't look at their wealth. All of that is the splendor of life, the worldly life. All of this is the splendor of the worldly life. And this is used so that we may test them in it. And it's a very important thing to do. And this is always something that I've personally taken strong credit for. Anytime somebody gives me a compliment, anytime someone gives me accolades, anytime someone kind of, elevates me, I always see that as the test of like, oh, will I think I'm great, or will I always be able to maintain my humbleness and appreciate that it's God that I have to keep focused on? And I should not don't get distracted by the shiny. The shiny looks so good and it feels so good. You're like, I gotta not look at the shiny and focus on being humble, and focus on, keep your eyes on the prize, keep yourself humble, and keep yourself focused. And the last couple of verses tells you exactly why. And the provision of your God is better and more lasting. Because if you're distracted by the worldly pleasures, then you're missing the grander scheme of life, which is very powerful.
وأمر أهلك بالصلاة واصطبر عليها لا نسألك رزقا نحن نرزقك والعاقبة للتقوى.
And enjoin, or it says order, but what more? Yeah, it is technically say order, but it's kind of like tell them to you, because you're not commanding anyone. You can't force anyone in religion. Very important to remember that from chapter 2. Enjoin your parents, enjoin your family. It's not just your parents, your family, with prayer, and be steadfast therein. Always pray and always hold on to it. And I underestimated the power of prayer when I first reverted, and when I first started praying last year. I was like, do I need to do 5? Can I do 3? Can I do... I was like kind of negotiating. This is the bargaining. Like, oh, it's tiring. Oh, it's exhausting. Oh. And now I kind of appreciate prayer so much more. It's become this therapeutic, grounding, mindful exercise, and it kind of consistently keeps me aligned with God, which I think is very key and very powerful and very significant. And this is why the Quran says, be steadfast in it, because there's a lot of benefits to it, and you don't notice these benefits. First thing that when you think of, oh, I have to pray 5 times a day, it feels exhausting. It feels like a lot of commitment, and you don't really see the value up front. It's only by doing it for a long time do you go, oh, actually, this is really good. And if I don't do it, I feel confused and lost and not certain. But when I do it, I have this peace. Life is hard and confusing and anxious. We can get anxious so easily. And by committing to prayer, do we really understand and appreciate God? And it's kind of like it builds your trust in God, and it reminds you to trust in God. So like, whatever happens, it's going to be okay. Because you're consistently praying to God, and you're consistently reminded to be humble and to trust God, and you're having this constant reverence. Therefore, it is, it's stabilizing, it's calming, it's peaceful, and that's why you should do it. And I have bothered my family with prayer enough, but I'll bother them some more, I'm sure. And we do not ask for you any provisions. We do not ask you to provide. Oh, we don't ask you to provide. We will provide, which is a very interesting. We will provide for you. We don't ask for you to provide for yourself. We provide for you, which is also one of the things that I hold steadfast in my heart, that God will provide. But it is terrifying, specifically because, money is a real concern, and not having a job is always terrifying. But I have this absolute faith that God will provide. I don't know where it comes from, but I am certain, And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't work. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive. And I'm doing my best to try and find something that will sustain me. But at the same time, I believe that all provision comes from God, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْتَقْوَى. And the outcome is for the righteous. The ultimate outcome is for the righteous. Makes sense.
وقالوا لولا يأتينا بآية من ربه أولم تأتهم بينة ما في الصحف الأولى.
Okay, now here's a couple of things. They say, why did he not come? Why did he not bring us from a sign from his God? Now, in this concept, in the context of the Prophet Muhammad, it was, why didn't he come with a miracle that we can see? And the question that follows it, that answers, it's a rhetorical question. Had it not come to them the evidence of what is in the scriptures of the former? Now, what is in the former scriptures? Now, first I'll say, the pagans of Mecca were not satisfied with the miracles of the Quran, so they asked for a tangible miracle. We've seen that before. And they said, hadn't they received the confirmation of what was in the earlier scripture? Now, this verse, I'll kind of explain this footnote. It says, it talks about the biblical stories confirmed by the Quran or the prophecies of Muhammad in the Bible. Some Muslim scholars cite Deuteronomy 18:15 to 18, Deuteronomy 18 verses 15 to 18, and 33:2, and Isaiah 42, which I actually think is talking about Ahmad, but anyway. And John 14:16 is examples of the description of the Prophet Muhammad in the Bible. However, Bible scholars interpret these verses differently, and this could be talking about that. This could be talking about the evidence of what is in the scriptures from the former. The other one could be a confirmation of those scriptures, an alignment of what is being said in the scriptures versus what is being said in the Quran. For instance, the fact that Jesus was God and Jesus was the Son of God, let's just say that Jesus was God is not in the Bible. It's not in the scripture. It's contextually understood. They're like, oh, he said code word 456, therefore he meant that he was God. And you're like, okay, but our verses and your scripture kind of align. They just not in the things that you're saying that aren't in there. That could be another example. There could be a kind of proof. But what I find most interesting about these verses is they're saying, why doesn't he come with a miracle? And then the next verse gives us a beautiful example of why he didn't come with a miracle.
ولو أنا أهلكناهم بعذاب من قبله لقالوا ربنا لولا أرسلت إلينا رسولا فنتبع آياتك من قبل أن نذل ونخزى.
And if we had sent him with miracles, or, the death and destruction and the devastation from the sky, and if we had destroyed them with torment from before him, they would have said, oh God, why didn't you send to us a messenger so that we would have followed your verses? So we would have followed your verses and your revelations from before that we were humiliated and disgraced. So here, kind of like the example is, they were saying he came with verses and explanations, and they said, why don't you come with a miracle that shows your power? And then if he had come with the miracle showing his power, they'd say, oh, why didn't there come a messenger to tell us all these things? It's kind of like saying it's a lose-lose situation. No matter what you do, if you bring a messenger explaining to you the stories and explaining to you what's going to happen, they're going to be like, we need some magic from the sky. And if you say magic from the sky that's going to destroy you, they go like, why don't you send us somebody to talk to us? If you sent someone to talk to us, we would have listened. I just found that to be hilarious and true. It's very true. No matter, in Arabic we have an expression, ما بيعجبهم العجب. They don't even liking. They won't like any, like the concept of liking anything. They don't like it. They don't like liking anything. That's it's such a, no matter what you do, the disbelievers are always going to go, well, you didn't give us, you gave us someone who gave us words, we didn't like it. You gave us someone who gave us destruction, we didn't like it. Stupid, dumb. I just found it very funny. And the last verse for today.
قل كل متربص فتربصوا فستعلمون من أصحاب الصراط السوي ومن اهتدى.
I always love this. Again, I like to think of the Quran as being a bit more sassy than usual, but I think that's just because I'm sassy. It says, say in response, Everyone is waiting. So wait. Just you wait. This is a symbol that means many different things in different cultures. I think this means like grazie in Italy, but in Arabic just you wait. Your doom is coming, bro. Your doom is coming. If it's just very everyone waiting, so just hang on a second. And it ends with saying, then you will know who were the companions of the way that is even the way that is the straight path, and who is truly guided. Beautiful verses for today. I learned a wonderful lesson. I'm very excited to share this with all the people that I discuss with. Thank you all for reaching to the end of the episode. As usual, we always end with Sadaqallahu al-Ali al-Azim. I thank you for watching, and I will catch you guys tomorrow as usual, and we will get into Surah Al-Anbiya, which means the chapter of the prophets. Ooh. I'm excited. I love the Quran. Thank you for watching. I love you. Get out of here. Ma'as salama. Bye.